Hey guys, tonight we journey back, way back, to the land of scorching sands, towering stone gods, and a river that both blesses and betrays. That's right, tonight we're stepping barefoot into the world of ancient Egypt. But don't get too excited. You probably won't survive this. The moment you're born, you're already sweating. You blink up at the straw roof of your family's mud brick hut. Your cradle, little more than a rough linen sling stretched between two wooden beams. The air is thick, still, and smells faintly of goat dung and something vaguely fishy. Outside, the Nile's humidity clings to everything like wet cloth. Congratulations. You've just been born into the working class of the New Kingdom, around 1300 BCE. Your mother dabs a smear of natron and oil on your skin to keep the flies off. It stings because it's basically ancient soap/salt scrub, and this is your first spa day. Welcome to self-care, Egyptian style. Your father, if he's home, might give a grunted nod. More likely, he's out bricklaying under the sun, using his own spit to smooth mortar. So much for a gentle start. You're not swaddled in fluffy blankets, but in whatever linen scraps are cleanish that week. If you're lucky, you'll make it past your first year. About a third of kids don't. Infant mortality is sky high, and it's not like anyone knows about bacteria yet. Diarrhea, snake bites, even a bad fever could be your final chapter before you've had your first fig. You grow up quickly here. By the time you can walk, you're expected to be useful. That might mean keeping the cooking fire lit, fetching river water in tiny pots, or helping your siblings shoo away ibises from the grain store. Not glamorous, but if you're not pulling your weight, someone else has to. And no one has energy to spare. Your first memories are probably of heat, hunger, and the bray of donkeys. You know the daily rhythms of the Nile before you understand what a day is. You learn that if the river runs high, food is good. If it runs low, people start whispering about curses. Historians still argue whether families believed in true divine punishment or just used the gods to explain the chaos. But either way, it keeps people obedient. Your parents aren't reading bedtime stories. They're more likely to tell you tales of crocodiles who eat naughty children, or demons that haunt disobedient boys. You start to believe your shadow can be stolen if you walk too far from home at dusk. And honestly, no one tells you otherwise. You're always itchy. Why? Because fleas and lice are basically members of the family. Your linen tunic, once you're old enough to need one, is stiff and unwashed, and your skin is constantly coated in a mix of sweat, dust, and fly guts. Forget about soap. It's too expensive for daily use. Instead, your mom might crush lotus petals and mix them with animal fat to give you a scent strong enough to make the neighbors think you've bathed. Still, there are small joys. You chase scarabs across sun-baked paths, play with carved wooden dolls or clay hippos, and eat dried dates until your teeth hurt. And yes, your teeth already hurt. Most bread is filled with sand and grit from stone-ground flour. You're chewing pebbles before you can count. Your name probably means something aspirational like Joy of Ra or He Who Hears the Crocodile, which is ironic because you're mostly just hearing your stomach growl. On feast days, though, those rare festival breaks, you might get honey cakes, fermented beer sips, and a moment to dance to drums in the village square. You feel briefly like a god. Then it's back to chores. Childhood isn't a protected phase. It's a short runway to adult labor. By 5 or 6, you're shadowing your parents or older siblings in their trade. That means long, dusty days making bricks, weaving reeds, or pounding barley for beer. And forget naps. If you so much as sit too long, someone assumes you're slacking and whacks you with a palm stick. Still, you have dreams. Maybe you see a scribe walk past in his spotless linen and think, that's the life. But education? That's for the elite. Unless your family has serious temple connections, you'll never hold a reed pen. And even if you do get lucky and land a place in a scribe school, your childhood becomes a blur of harsh discipline and endless copying of hieroglyphs. One wrong bird symbol, and your knuckles get rapped. Multiple times. Meanwhile, your body is already under siege. Parasites in your drinking water. Cuts that fester because no one has antiseptic. Your belly bloats. Not from overeating, but from malnutrition. You've never tasted sugar. You don't know what fruit out of season means because all you've ever eaten are the same 3 things in rotation. You pray the fish show up this week. Sometimes, the grown-ups murmur about the gods' displeasure when a child falls ill. Sometimes they blame the desert spirits. Often, they just sigh. Death is so frequent that grief has a practical rhythm. Tears, burial, back to work. And speaking of burial, you've already walked past your first funeral by age 4. A linen-wrapped body carried on a plank. Mourners wailing theatrically. The smell of incense failing to cover the smell of decay. You don't understand it yet, but you file it away. One day, that'll be you. Maybe sooner than you think. By the time you're 8, there's no more illusion. Childhood is over. You are now a miniature adult with full-time responsibilities and 0 pay. Your knees are crusted with dry mud. Your hands are permanently cracked, and your back already knows the cruel geometry of bending over baskets, jars, or scaffolding. You start your day before dawn, long before that golden sun has a chance to blind you. You grope around in the semi-darkness of your one-room house, trying not to trip over the goat, your sister, or a loose pile of kindling. Breakfast? If there's time, you chew a hunk of leftover flatbread, so dry it could double as a whetstone. The goal is to swallow before your molars chip. Then comes your first job of the day, water fetching. You carry a jug, nearly half your size, and start the trek to the river. You pass neighbors doing the same thing, all of you silent, bleary-eyed, and hoping the crocodiles are busy elsewhere. The Nile is life, but it's also where people go to disappear. You saw a boy, dragged under last month, his scream swallowed faster than you can blink. You fill your jar, feel your shoulders burn, and start the hike back, careful not to spill. If you do, you'll be sent back, and you're already late for the next task, grinding grain. Ah, grinding. The soothing, never-ending joy of pushing a stone over wheat for hours, with grit flying in your eyes and sneaking into your nose. This is how every single loaf of bread in your village starts, by scraping grain into dust, while you hum whatever tune your mother taught you. By the time you're done, you've inhaled enough silica dust to pave a courtyard. Historians still argue whether this constant inhalation contributed to the chronic lung disease so common in mummies, or whether that was just life in Egypt being, well, brutal. Next comes dough mixing, and this part is kind of fun. You get to use your feet. Yes, literally. You stomp grain mush into dough with the same enthusiasm your family uses to crush grapes for wine. It's squishy. It's weirdly satisfying, and you're not supposed to eat any of it raw. But of course, you sneak a bite. Who can resist? Your mother catches you and smacks your head with a rolled-up reed. You're not hurt, but your pride is. She mutters something about the goddess Hathor watching you, and you feel guilty for about 3 seconds. Then you're back at it because the bread won't bake itself. Later in the morning, your father returns from the brickyard, or if you're a boy, you're already there with him. Brick making is less of a job and more of a test of how long the human spine can suffer before it gives up. You stomp straw and mud together, pour it into wooden molds, and leave it to bake in the sun. Each brick looks identical, but you still get yelled at for the lopsided one. Which one? Doesn't matter. You're wrong by default. Meanwhile, girls often stay home with their mothers, which does not mean less work. You're churning beer, cleaning fish, scraping resin off tools, or weaving reeds into baskets until your fingertips bleed. There's a popular assumption that weaving is relaxing. Sure, if your idea of relaxing includes splinters, backaches, and the constant reminder that if your basket doesn't hold water, you'll hear about it for a week. Social life? Not much. You might whisper jokes with friends while lugging jugs or sneak off to play with knuckle bones made from sheep joints. One time, you and your friend painted a silly face on a papyrus scrap. It was funny until your neighbor's husband, a scribe, saw it and reported you for defacing sacred imagery. You spent the night without dinner and swore off jokes for a month. Occasionally, the overseer walks through your work site, a man who wears finer linen, smells like frankincense, and carries a stick. You freeze every time he passes. He might nod, say nothing, or slap someone across the back for slouching. His presence is enough to keep everyone terrified and productive. But there are moments, brief ones, that feel like freedom. Like when a breeze from the river actually cools your sweat-crusted skin. Or when a date falls from a tree and no one else sees it, and you get to eat something sweet without asking permission. Or when a wandering musician comes through town, plucking a lute and singing about the sun, God Ra chasing serpents through the underworld. And for 10 whole minutes, you're somewhere else. Then your little brother gets sick. You watch your mother tie blue beads around his wrist and mutter spells, while your father boils herbs that smell like sadness and wood smoke. No doctors, no medicine, just hope, salt water, and prayers. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But you learn, even as a kid, how to cry without making a sound. And just when you think it can't get worse, locusts come. The sky darkens. The fields vanish. Your family's already meager grain supply shrinks to nothing. You try to slap the bugs away with a palm frond, but they're everywhere. In your mouth, your ears, your food. You cough for days afterward because, apparently, locusts don't sit well with sand bread and spoiled onions. You don't sleep well. Ever. Your mat is scratchy. Your neighbors argue at night, and wild dogs bark at shadows. Sometimes, the priest from the temple chants until midnight, his voice droning about eternal order, while you lay there, wondering why your world feels anything but ordered. There's one thing that comforts you: the stars. Every night you look up and see the same constellations your ancestors did, painted across the sky like the ceiling of a god's palace. You make up your own stories. You pretend they're watching over you. You pretend they care. Because here, in ancient Egypt, you're not a child. You're a tiny cog in a massive, sacred machine. And if that cog breaks, another takes its place. By the time you're 12, your hands are callous beyond your years. Your knees have forgotten softness, and you've grown fluent in the silent language of survival. There's no graduation, no rite of passage, just the unspoken understanding that you now bear the full weight of adult expectations. And if you're a girl, there's a fair chance you're already betrothed. Your family doesn't have gold or cattle to trade, so the agreement was made months ago, sealed over shared beer and nods. You met the man once. He's 23, smells like fish oil, and called you sturdy. That was his compliment. If you're a boy, your path isn't much freer. You're either conscripted to accrue building storehouses for the grain tax, or dragged along by your uncle to learn the stonecutter's craft. Either way, your days are carved into predictably brutal chunks. Work, eat, ache, repeat. You wake now, not to sunrise, but to barking orders, your father's voice cutting through the thin morning air. There's no argument. Arguing is for people with leverage. You simply rise, splash water on your face, and begin your day with the soft crunch of dirt between your teeth because someone shook the mat too hard again. Today's assignment? Hauling. Of course. You sling baskets of sand and lime over your shoulder and march behind 10 others just like you, all stepping in rhythm, each step stirring up little storms of dust. The sun hasn't even peaked, and already your skin feels like it's being peeled off, layer by layer. At the site, the foreman, whose patience is inversely proportional to his girth, hands you a blunt copper chisel and points to a stone that hasn't moved in 3,000 years. Or so it feels. You chip, sweat, and wonder how something can be both scorching and sharp. But this is sacred work, building granaries and homes for the nobles, whose lives are so different they might as well be from another planet. Still, it's not all labor. Sometimes you're pulled aside for the priest's errands. You carry ritual jars or sweep the floor of the small temple where incense coils lazily in the air like a god's sigh. The temple is cool, shadowed, and strangely peaceful. You like it here, even if the priest looks at you like you're something he stepped over. It's in this quiet place that you hear something that sticks with you. A traveler, older and leather-faced, mentions the Black Land and the Red Land. The Black Land, he says, is where you live, the fertile, blessed strip along the Nile. The Red Land is everything else, desert, wasteland, chaos. You ask if anyone lives in the Red Land, and he grins without humor. Only madmen, rebels, and spirits, he says. That night, you stare out at the horizon where the black turns to red and wonder who you'd rather be, safe and broken, or free and lost. Historians still argue whether the line between peasant and outlaw in ancient Egypt was truly so stark, or whether it was more about taxes and timing. But for you, rebellion isn't a fantasy. It's just another way to die sooner. Your stomach growls. Lunch today was a stew that had more sand than lentils, followed by stale beer that somehow still made your head spin. You're grateful, of course. The old man down the road hasn't eaten in 2 days. He just sits by the river, muttering to the fish and calling them his ancestors. You joke about it with your friend Nebu, who's missing 3 teeth and has a laugh like a wheezing donkey. Nebu's the closest thing you have to joy around here. He once tried to climb a statue of Sobek and fell headfirst into a canal. He nearly drowned, but came up with a fish in each hand and declared himself the god of snacks. Even in a world this hard, laughter finds a way. Like the time a monkey stole your cousin's linen loincloth during a festival and paraded it like a royal banner. Or when a chicken snuck into the scribe's tent and wrote ASDF across a tax scroll with muddy feet. You weren't supposed to see that, but you did, and it was glorious. The end of the workday doesn't come with a bell or whistle, just a grunt from the foreman. and a long walk home in twilight. Your feet throb, your arms feel detached, but the river glows gold, and for a moment, everything is quiet, except the hum of insects and the occasional plop of a fish jumping through reeds. You pass a procession on the way home. A noblewoman, carried in a chair by 6 men, is surrounded by servants with fans and a perfumer trailing behind like a loyal scent cloud. She doesn't look at you. Why would she? You're the dirt she glides above, but you stare at her jewelry, turquoise, lapis lazuli, and carnelian, glinting like pieces of another world. Your mother sees your face when you get home and knows you've looked too long at something forbidden. She tells you a story about a girl who married above her station and was struck blind by jealous spirits. It's not a warning. It's an old wish dressed as a tale. You nod anyway. That night, you dream of pyramids. You're climbing one, higher and higher, while someone calls your name from the top. But when you reach the summit, there's nothing there, just sand and wind and the long echo of silence. You wake up sore and older somehow, not in age, but in weight. You're no longer wondering what comes next. You already know. You've always heard that death isn't the end. It's just the next life. But right now, the only afterlife you care about is a nap that lasts more than 4 hours without someone shouting about livestock. Still, every part of your daily routine is saturated with death. Not in a creepy, horror movie way, but in the casual, dust on everything, this too shall pass kind of vibe. The first time you see a mummified body up close, you're carrying jars of natron into the embalmer's workshop. It's a side gig. Your father calls it extra copper for dates, but you know it's because he wants you to understand what really waits at the finish line. The room smells like salted meat and hot linen. On a stone table, a thin man who probably once laughed and danced now lies stiff and pale. A hole where his nose used to be. His skin pulled so tight, it looks like old leather sandals. The embalmer hums a little tune while removing the man's insides with a bent spoon and zero ceremony. "You'll be this one day," he says, glancing at you. "Best get used to it." You nod. Because what else is there to say? Historians still argue whether embalmers were revered priests or lowly tradesmen with iron guts. Some sources suggest they were shunned by polite society, treated like sewer cleaners. But others insist they held a sacred place, bridging this life and the one beyond. You lean toward the first camp because no one who hums off key while drying intestines feels especially holy. Later, you help smear resin on the linen wraps. It's sticky, pungent, and stains everything it touches. The resin, you're told, protects the soul's journey. One misstep in burial, and the spirit gets lost, doomed to wander the desert like a forgotten goat. That night, you smear a bit of it on your doorway, just in case. You ask your mother what happens when we die. She pauses, hands deep in dough, and says, "If your heart's lighter than a feather, you get paradise. If not, Amit eats you." Amit, the devourer, a part lion, part hippo, part crocodile goddess with the worst table manners in mythology. She's like a one-beast firing squad. You picture her chewing slowly, while the souls of the unworthy scream from her jaws. Comforting, really. And then there's the ceremony of the opening of the mouth. You don't see it in person. Those are for the nobles. But everyone talks about it. It's the ritual that breathes life into the mummy's senses so they can eat, speak, and see in the afterlife. You wonder if they open the mouth too wide. Does the mummy complain about the taste of resin? For common folk like you, death is stripped down, a shallow grave, a reed mat, maybe a favorite spoon buried with you if your family's feeling sentimental. There's no grand tomb, no paintings of paradise, just dirt and memory, and hopefully a few prayers to help your soul find Ra's boat. Still, the concept of the afterlife shapes everything you do. You're told to be honest, kind, and respectful, not because it makes life easier. Spoiler, it doesn't. But because the gods are watching. All of them. All the time. Even that weird baboon-headed one. Especially him. Once a month, you're dragged to the temple for offerings. It's a spectacle. Dancers, priests, smoke curling from incense burners in slow, hypnotic spirals. You bring barley and dried fish and lay them in front of a statue whose eyes seem far too knowing. Sometimes you wonder if the flies outnumber the humans here. You pause your weaving and glance at the tiny statue of Bes, the protector god, perched on the windowsill. His grotesque bearded face might seem odd, but he's meant to scare away evil spirits, and maybe the flies too. Your mother swears by him, but you suspect his real power is in making you smile during the tough times. Life inside the hut is a delicate balance. You share the space with your family, your father's tools, your mother's pots, and the occasional rat brave enough to scurry in at night. The smell of stale bread mixed with smoky embers lingers in every corner. Privacy is a luxury you can't afford, and every cough, every sneeze echoes through the thin walls. You recall the strange tradition of using crocodile dung as a sort of ancient deodorant or sunscreen. You're not sure which is worse, the smell or the idea of smearing it on your skin. But then, desperate times call for desperate measures. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just a peculiar quirk of certain regions. Your evenings end with your mother telling stories of gods and heroes under a flickering oil lamp. The shadows dance on the walls, making the tales come alive in your mind. Sometimes, the stories offer a brief escape, a chance to imagine a life beyond dust and sweat. And yet, the reality always returns. You roll up your reed mat and prepare for another day under the unforgiving sun, where comfort is a distant dream and survival is a daily battle. You shuffle along the packed dirt road toward the market. The smell of roasted barley and spices thicken the air. Today, you're tasked with selling some of the family's goods, woven baskets, a few jars of olive oil, and a handful of figs. Markets in ancient Egypt are bustling hubs, loud and chaotic, but also a chance to glimpse a life beyond your village's harsh routine. Merchants shout over one another, hawking everything from linen cloth to exotic perfumes brought from distant lands. You dodge stray animals and persistent children tugging at your sleeves, begging for a taste of your figs. The market feels alive with possibility, but also ruthless competition. You learn quickly that haggling is a skill, one that can make or break your family's day. Money isn't like what you know now. Instead of coins, you deal mostly in barter, trading goods and favors. You hope the olive oil fetches a good exchange because the family's bread supply is running dangerously low. Sometimes, you see wealthier Egyptians flaunting their gold jewelry and fine clothes, a stark reminder of the gulf between classes. Food here is a mixed bag. You spot vendors selling dried fish, fresh vegetables, and oddly shaped breads. Your stomach growls, but you resist. Splurging is a luxury. Survival means rationing every crumb. Historians still argue whether common Egyptians had enough protein or mostly survived on bread and beer. but you can tell by the way your muscles ache that your diet isn't exactly gourmet. Speaking of beer, you spot a brewer nearby, pouring thick, foamy brews into clay cups. Beer is a staple, safer than most water, and a comfort at the end of a brutal day. You're too young to drink, but you watch the adults laugh and swap stories over mugs that smell faintly of bread and barley. A quirky fact that amuses you: Egyptians sometimes used bread as a form of currency. Imagine paying your taxes with a loaf. This means bakers held surprising power in society. Some even rumored to have secret recipes that made their bread irresistible. Market day isn't just about commerce, it's social theater. You overhear gossip about the pharaoh's latest decree and the grand temple construction project. Priests parade with sacred banners, their voices rising in chant. The atmosphere is festive, despite the grinding poverty that many try to mask with colorful robes. Yet, the market's energy is a double-edged sword. Pickpockets lurk, and you've heard stories of travelers robbed on lonely roads. The harsh reality of ancient Egypt is that danger walks alongside opportunity. As the sun dips low, you pack up your unsold goods, feeling the weight of the day on your shoulders. The market fades behind you, but the lessons linger. Here, in the cacophony of voices and smells, you learn that life's brutality is tempered by human resilience, wit, and a touch of stubborn hope. The evening air cools slightly as you make your way back home. The sky painted with streaks of orange and pink, a brief, beautiful reprieve from the relentless heat. You feel the day's exhaustion settle deep into your bones. The village is quiet now, except for the occasional bleat of a goat or the soft murmur of distant prayers to the gods. Nights in ancient Egypt bring a different kind of challenge, one that you've come to dread almost as much as the blistering days. Your hut feels smaller in the fading light, the shadows stretching and twisting on the walls. You lay your reed mat down on the dirt floor, the scratchy fibers barely comforting your aching back. There's no mattress, no pillow, just the hard ground and your tired body. Sleep is a necessity, not a pleasure. You try to block out the sounds, the creaking of wooden beams, the scuttling of nocturnal insects, and the ever-present croak of frogs near the Nile. Sometimes you lie awake and wonder about the stars, so bright and clear above the desert. The priests say they're the souls of the dead watching over you. But sometimes the vastness feels less protective and more like a reminder of how small and fragile your life is. Historians still debate how ancient Egyptians understood the cosmos, but for you, the stars are both a mystery and a lonely comfort. Your body aches with the fatigue of constant labor, your hands cracked and scarred from years of work. You recall the strange, almost comedic advice passed down by your grandmother about using donkey dung to treat wounds. It sounds ridiculous, and maybe it is, but desperate times mean desperate remedies. You laugh quietly to yourself, imagining the horrified face of a visiting noble hearing that story. Despite the hardships, there's a rhythm to your life here, one dictated by the Nile's flood cycle, the sun's path, and the seasons of planting and harvest. You find strange beauty in this order, even as it reminds you of the relentless cycle of toil that traps you. You close your eyes, letting the sounds of the night wash over you. The world outside is vast and indifferent, but inside your heart, there's a stubborn spark, a desire to survive, to find moments of joy in this brutal existence. Maybe one day your life will change, maybe not. For now, you rest, carried gently on the breeze of ancient winds, surrounded by stories, struggles, and a civilization that, despite its cruelty, shaped the world forever. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the stars twinkle faintly overhead, the harsh edges of the day begin to soften, melting away into the quiet calm of night. You breathe deeply, feeling the cool desert air brush gently against your skin, a delicate balm after hours under the sun's unforgiving gaze. The sand beneath you is still warm, but somehow less hostile now, almost comforting in its familiarity. The struggles you face, water scarcity, blistering heat, exhausting labor, fade into the background as your mind drifts on the slow currents of memory and dreams. Ancient Egypt's vast deserts and mighty rivers cradle you in a timeless embrace, reminding you that even in the most brutal conditions, life finds a way to persist. The gods may watch with stern eyes, but within you burns a quiet resilience, a steady flame that refuses to be extinguished. Tonight, let the stories and sounds of that ancient world lull you into restful sleep. Imagine the gentle ripple of the Nile, the whisper of palm fronds swaying in the breeze, and the faint murmurs of distant prayers blending with the hush of night. These are the soft echoes of a civilization that rose, fell, and left behind secrets that still captivate us. So close your eyes, let go of the day's worries, and sink deeper into the gentle darkness. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again, fierce and bright, but for now, peace wraps around you like a cool, silken shawl. Sleep well. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams. The priest chants, "You try not to sneeze." Your cousin does, and gets smacked on the head with a palm frond. There's a rumor among your friends that if you look directly into the statue's eyes during prayer, you'll dream of your death. Naturally, you do it. That night, you dream of drowning in the Nile, while crocodiles argue over who gets the tastiest part. It's weirdly bureaucratic. You don't tell anyone. The cult of death isn't morbid here, it's practical. Death is just another neighbor, always watching from the edge of the field, waiting for you to slip. You learn not to fear it exactly, but to nod in its direction now and then. A quiet little, "still not today" acknowledgement. One time, a nobleman's daughter drowns during the flood season. She was riding in a boat carved like a lotus flower, singing, then gone. They say her tomb was carved with blue stars and lined with gold. They buried her with dolls, combs, and an ivory mirror, so she could look beautiful in eternity. You walk past her tomb later that month. It's guarded, but not well. And for a second, you think of sneaking a peek. Just one glance at the rich girl's afterlife starter kit. But then you remember Amit, licking her chops. Still, you wonder what it would be like to have someone care enough to give you more than a ditch and a whispered name. Back home, your grandmother hums a funeral dirge as she weaves. You ask her what it means, and she tells you it's to remind the dead not to be lonely. They forget, you know, she says, how it felt to breathe. It's an odd idea. That memory fades even in death. But as you listen to her low song and watch the fire crackle, you find yourself humming along. Because here in ancient Egypt, even grief has a melody. You wake up sticky with sweat, the sun already pounding like an angry god on your bare back. Today's the market day, and for a moment, you almost forget how exhausting your daily grind is because there's something different in the air. The chaotic buzz of bargaining, laughter, and the sharp scent of spices and sweat mixing together like some ancient cocktail no one asked for. You push through the throng of people, packed like sardines under makeshift tents of linen and palm leaves. There's a boy chasing a chicken, an old woman hawking dried figs, and the constant drone of sellers shouting prices that are way too high for your meager copper coins. You clutch your small pouch, hoping for a trade better than yesterday's. The market is a melting pot, a microcosm of Egypt itself. Traders from Nubia hawking ebony wood, merchants from Byblos with cedar, and sometimes, if the winds are right, whispers of faraway lands, like Punt, where incense grows wild. You marvel at the colors and textures, the cacophony of languages swirling around you. It's like being swallowed by a living painting, one where everyone's vying for scraps. Despite the noise, a few rules govern the chaos. For instance, it's taboo to haggle in the temple district, where silence is sacred and the smell of frankincense chokes the air. Yet right next door, in the bustling market lanes, haggling is an art form. You watch as a merchant and a buyer lock eyes like gladiators, each testing the other's patience and purse. Your favorite stall belongs to an old man named Petey, who deals in papyrus scrolls and worn-out ink brushes. He tells tall tales about scribes who once got lost in hieroglyphs so deep they never returned to the land of the living. You don't know if it's true, but it's entertaining, and beats hauling sand for 10 hours. While the market offers a temporary escape, the harsh realities are never far behind. Your mother reminds you to buy enough grain for the family, even if it means scrimping on salt. Salt, she says, is the taste of life, but bread is the taste of survival. You nod and tuck the coins tighter, mentally calculating every bite you'll have to sacrifice. But it's not just about food and trade. The market is also where news flows faster than the Nile during flood season. You overhear whispers of foreign invaders spotted on the edges of the delta, rumors that send shivers down your spine. Historians still argue whether these skirmishes truly threatened Egypt's stability or were just the stuff of exaggerated gossip. Either way, it's enough to make you glance over your shoulder. You also hear of strange new gods creeping into villages, beings with no crocodile heads or jackal faces, but with names that twist your tongue and stories that make your mother clutch her amulet tighter. Some say these gods promise easier lives. Others say they bring curses. The debate swirls like dust devils in the desert. On the lighter side, you catch sight of a troupe of entertainers, jugglers, musicians, and dancers, their bright costumes almost garish against the dusty backdrop. They perform tricks that make you laugh and forget the aches in your feet. At one point, a monkey dressed in a tiny skirt does an awkward shimmy that has everyone, including a grumpy old man, breaking into smiles. You almost believe that joy might be possible, even here. Later, you spot a street artist painting a caricature of the local governor. The image is unflattering: big nose, floppy ears, and a suspiciously tiny beard. Someone gasps, but the artist winks and says, "Better laugh now, before the guards find out." You wonder if anyone's ever been thrown into the river for less. As the sun dips low, the market slows. You clutch your small bundle of goods and begin the trudge back to your cramped home, where the cicadas sing a relentless symphony. Your neighbor is already roasting dried fish over a smoky fire, and the smell teases your empty stomach. Despite the day's trials, you feel a flicker of hope. Here, amid the dust and noise, life finds a way to breathe, to pulse with stubborn resilience. But you also know tomorrow will bring more toil, more grit under your nails, and the slow, grinding certainty that ancient Egypt is no place for the faint-hearted. You wake to the distant roar of the Nile, more flood than river this season, spilling over its banks like a stubborn guest who refuses to leave. The water's muddy breath drags across your village, soaking the cracked mud bricks and turning the dirt paths into slippery clay. It's the flood season, and while everyone says it's a blessing, you're less convinced. Your family scrambles to move the livestock, goats, a stubborn donkey, and a skinny cow that barely produces milk, up to higher ground. Your muscles ache from hauling heavy baskets, but you push through. Survival is a constant negotiation with the river's whims. Flooding means food, yes, because the Nile brings fresh silt that makes the soil fertile. But it also means disease, destruction, and sometimes death. Historians still argue whether the benefits of the flood season outweighed its brutal downsides, but for you, it's a messy, exhausting gamble every year. You recall your father's gruff warnings: never drink the floodwaters, child. The crocodiles don't care if you're thirsty. And he's not kidding. Last year, a boy from down the road disappeared, swept away while trying to rescue his family's boat. No one found him, just the broken wood and a few tears. Yet in the chaos, there's a strange rhythm. The village gathers near the riverbank, exchanging stories, sharing fish, and offering prayers to Hapi, the god of the Nile, who you hope will keep the waters generous but not murderous. The flood changes everything, even how you dress. Waterproof leather is unheard of, so you wrap yourself in linen that clings wet and heavy to your skin. Clumsy, but better than nothing. You squint against the glare bouncing off water puddles and dodge mud-caked children splashing around like it's a game. Your grandmother insists on mixing up a concoction of herbs and oils to protect the family from sickness. She grumbles about the evil spirits riding the flood and slathers your chest with a bitter paste made from juniper berries and other strange-smelling plants. It tastes awful, but you let her do it because sometimes belief is the only medicine. The flood also brings pests. You curse the mosquitoes buzzing around your ears at night, their bites itching like tiny needles. The village healer warns of malaria, a sickness no one wants to name out loud. You scratch until your skin bleeds and wonder if ancient remedies will hold up this time. Meanwhile, the floodwaters drown the fields and force the village to live on fish and bread alone. The bakery sells less bread, and the fishmonger's prices climb. You hear that even the pharaoh worries about the harvest this year. No one is immune to the flood's wrath. Amid the turmoil, a quirky tradition keeps the mood light: the Nile race. Young men construct crude boats from reeds and driftwood, racing against each other on the swollen river. It's chaotic and mostly dangerous, but the laughter echoes across the water. You imagine joining next year, despite the crocodile warnings. While the flood is a natural disaster, it's also a sacred event. Priests perform elaborate ceremonies, chanting and burning incense on riverbanks, invoking blessings for bountiful crops and safe passage to the afterlife. The ritual smoke mingles with the heavy wet air, creating a haze that feels like a veil between worlds. One night, under a moon so bright it could shame the sun, you spot a procession of priests carrying sacred boats carved in gold and cedar. The villagers bow low, chanting prayers in voices that rise and fall like the river's tide. You wonder what it feels like to be part of such grandeur, if only for a moment. Still, back in your small, damp home, you wrap your thin blanket tighter and listen to the flood's endless whisper. It's a lullaby, and a warning all at once, reminding you that life here is fragile and unpredictable.